Every 4 years, the United States holds a presidential election, has done so since its inception. In 2020, on November 3rd, this was no exception, and the current president of the United States at the time, President Donald J. Trump, was running for re-election against Joseph R. Biden. On November 3rd, there was an election that was held, and two things primarily, I would argue, made this highly unusual. The first thing that made the election highly unusual was the fact that we had a president in office who was unusually outspoken, outright crass or rude, or worse to some people, to many people at times. And he did not come from a background of politics. This was the first elected job he had held in his entire life, in his 70s. So that was highly unusual. The second thing that made the election highly unusual is that for the entire year, the country had been mired in coronavirus. So we were dealing with an unknown virus, and we were learning as we went along, and people were getting sick, and there were contentious issues surrounding it. Wear a mask or don't wear a mask, or should we have laws requiring people to wear masks, or is that unconstitutional, and should we just recommend it? There was a lot of back and forth. It's fair to say that both parties made political hay of the issue, as they generally do. And so headed into the election, people were not able to leave their homes, or at least a large number of people were concerned about being able to leave their homes in order to get to the polls to vote. Therefore, mail-in voting was instituted nationwide, and it varied from state to state as it was implemented by the state legislatures. On November 3rd, the election was held. By the evening, the president had won Florida and Ohio and was ahead in Pennsylvania. The reason I mention this is because for the last several elections, those have been the three key swing states. So to lose or win any of those three is a really big deal. So everyone is watching Ohio and Florida and Pennsylvania every election now. So when the president had come that far, it felt very routine. It felt ordinary, the expected outcome. And I say that because the president had run a very well-marketed, enthusiastic campaign with music and crowds of people. And of course, this created controversy because they either weren't wearing masks or they weren't social distancing. So that created another issue. His opponent, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris, as vice president, ran a very different campaign where when people would see them, it was generally like a drive-up type of thing. You didn't see the big crowds because of the way that they had planned theirs out. Mr. Biden did not speak to the media very often, and when he did, it was very structured. And so this led to accusations about his mental fitness and ability to run the country. And when the evening had set upon us, as I mentioned, things largely felt normal. I think to most people, I don't think there were a lot of surprises there. However, by the morning, we were told that in 4 different states, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, overnight counting votes had continued. And the votes that were added after the polls closed largely went to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, almost exclusively in some areas, in very unusual amounts that created controversy. What were the unusual amounts due to backed up mail-in voting batches, or were they because of deliberate anomalies created during the election? It wasn't known, although it was suggested, and we really never were able to hear any evidence. So I don't suppose that we could render a determination on the truth value of any of the claims. That being said, on January 6th, the president had rallied his supporters to come to Washington, D.C., to support him in this big crescendo, because that's the day when they officially count the votes and formally appoint the president. And so the president was in Washington, D.C. His supporters were there, and the enthusiasm and the excitement, and I think it's fair to say the anger and the rage from his own supporters, who felt that they were cheated and had an election stolen from them, overreacted and ended up breaching the Capitol with some measure of force. And this created a big controversy to follow as to whether or not it was a violent takeover, or if it was more of a, I don't know what the proper term would be, a more casual, if you will, type of event. It's hard to characterize the entire thing as a violent episode when there are so many images of smiling people walking around, going like this, and taking selfies with police officers, and so it's very unclear as to what happened there for that reason, and for that we should all hold the media accountable. So I did my best on that one. I don't think I'm going to make any edits on this.